Well, let's go to Australia Day, because it'll be honest, and this is, again, almost now, Dan, the crucible about the cultural self-loathing of the elites in Australia. I predict post-Bondi, we're going to see a resurgence of patriotism and Australia Day flags and other things amongst ordinary Australians. We'll get out to the suburbs, we'll see them, and everywhere else we'll have the Invasion Day protests and other things. But you've seen at the IPA a real shift in national mood.
Yeah, we have, Peter. And now keep in mind this poll was taken in early December, so before Bondi, and I agree with you, the numbers have probably only gone up since then. But just look at the numbers on the screen. I mean, it's skyrocketed in terms of the support for Australia Day. We're now at 76% of Australians say that they want Australia Day on the 26th of January. So remember, the question that was asked is not just do you like Australia Day, but do you want to celebrate it on the 26th of January, which is, you know, the date of contention to those elites that you reference. And, you know, this surge in support has been driven by 18 to 24-year-olds. Their support is at 83% for 18 to 24-year-olds, and that's gone up something like 20 points over the last couple of years. So we're seeing a resurgence in patriotism amongst the youngest generation. And I believe what is happening is there's a yearning in our country for a sense of belonging, a sense of unity, and Australians want to have a political standard bearer that will unite our country, as you say, especially post-Bondi. The other interesting thing is you mentioned the usual Invasion Day protests, but I've got to say I haven't seen the usual cavalcade of you know, the sort of the purple hair brigade that's out there every year. They haven't been out there this year so far. So, you know, from my perspective, I think this debate is over. Australia Day is the 26th of January, always was and always will be.
Councillor Max Warkon, an Indigenous man.
Monday the 26th of January, it's Australia Day. Some people will celebrate it and others won't. But for me, as an Indigenous man, I celebrate Australia Day. Sure, there are some things in the past that were quite shameful, but I celebrate Australia Day, not because of those things that we did, but those things that we are and those things that we're becoming. So happy Australia Day and have a great day.
You by the team that gave you August 31 and October 19. These were the days that Australia stood up. Now comes the day that defines us all. January 26, 2026. A date so powerful, so symbolic, it literally speaks for itself. January 26, 26. A sequence written in our soil. One nation, 2 centuries, generations who built, fought and bled for this land. This isn't politics, folks. This is survival. We march to end mass immigration. We march to protect our borders, our culture, our children's future, because no nation survives when it forgets who it is. They tried to silence us after August 31. They tried to smear all of us after October 19.
When did it become racist to be a patriot?
The Australian people have had enough.
With the backing of real politicians.
How dare you bring these people to our country and then have them be looked after by the public purse?
This nation is sick and tired of migration.
But we're still here, louder, prouder, stronger and more united than ever. This is the line in the red dust.
A disturbing letter sent to a Western Sydney mosque ahead of Australia Day is tonight in the hands of police. The 4-page document allegedly calling for acts of violence to be committed, putting both authorities and community groups on high alert.
Australia Day, a complicated public holiday, often marked by protests. Now those demonstrators have become a target. A threatening letter sent to Lakemba Mosque inciting violence towards groups including Muslims, Aboriginals, even supporters of Labor and the Greens.
The content is absolutely abhorrent, inciting to kill any human being, regardless of where they originate from.
The letter now in the hands of forensics as counter-terrorism investigators try to track down its author.
What have we learned, if anything, from the Bondi crisis? And it's sad that we've resorted.
Police gearing up for hordes of Australia Day protesters.
We are going to show up in our thousands, as we do every year, and we want to show that we're here and we're going to continue to fight.
Anti-immigration and Invasion Day groups set to cross paths at Flinders Street.
I think people should consider what they're doing on Australia Day. Because it can be at a time of heightened community concern.
This year, for the first time, there are extra measures to protect our police from the protesters. General Duties officers to be equipped with 300 helmets.
It's a really sad state of affairs that our police are being issued helmets and that they need them.
Trialled by Victoria Police late last year, it's a move the Police Association has long been calling for after a string of head injuries at protests.
We know that we want to keep people safe in this moment, and particularly after the Bondi massacre.
Rallies may be here to stay, but new research shows attitudes to Australia Day are changing. 76% of surveyed Australians now support celebrating the day on January 26. That's even higher of young Australians, 83% in favour. Only 10% disagree with that date.
This is one of the highest results in terms of the support for Australia Day. What this shows is that patriotism has been reawakened.
Rochelle Brown, 7 News.
So this is a headline from the Daily Telegraph telling us that young people are overwhelmingly proud of our country and they're leading the charge for Australia Day. It actually shouldn't take young people to tell older people that we need to be proud of our country. I mean, look at what's happening in Iran. They're literally fighting, giving their lives up to have what we have. And yet here, there's so many big corporates and woke leftist politicians telling us that we need to hang our heads in shame because of our past. No, we should be proud of Australia and we should be celebrating Australia Day. Good on these young people for understanding that. And I can't wait to celebrate Australia Day on Jan 26 with you.
Australia needs Australia Day. Every Aussie needs Australia Day. And I know what people say straight off the bat. Oh, white Australians, this, that, or the other. Fuck you, you racist. Okay? How about that? How do you like that? We need to, number one, stop blaming white people for everything that's gone wrong in certain people's lives. That needs to stop fucking now. Never forget what happened. Always understand what happened and learn about what happened. But we need to get to the point where at some point we go, let's move forward as a nation. Otherwise, for the next 1,000 years, we're all going to be sitting here until the Chinese property groups will kick us all out.
My children say to me, Happy Invasion Day, Dad. But I say to my children, Happy Unity Day. Why? Because the 26th of January is a celebration of division. Australia Day and Invasion Day. So let's have a day of unity and forgiveness. The reason why? Forgiveness. Look, I grew up in this country sexually, physically, mentally, and racially abused. But I forgive. I've forgiven from my heart, and that has set me free. So on the 26th of January, Unity Day, love somebody, hug somebody, forgive somebody, because we are one.
One of my sons came to me the other day and said, "Dad, can we have an Australia Day party next Monday at our house?" I agreed, and now he's got 30 mates coming over for a barbecue and a swim in the pool. Pray for me. Turns out my 20-year-old son is not alone in wanting to celebrate Australia Day. He's part of an overwhelming majority. New polling from the Institute of Public Affairs shows support for keeping Australia Day on January 26 has jumped to 76%. That's up from 69% last year and 63% in 2024. And the popularity of Australia Day is highest among young people, aged 18 to 24, amongst whom 89% said they were proud to be Australian. Joining me now to discuss is Indigenous activist and businessman Warren Mundine. Warren, surprised by this polling?
No, not surprised at all. You know, in fact, it's been a big shift. I know you're talking about your son. I've noticed that with my sons and his mates. They come around. They're very proud of being Australians. They're very proud of that. They're very, very proud of celebrating, Australia Day and that. So look, these figures don't surprise me at all. And isn't it great at a time where after Bondi, all this social cohesion and that, we've got all these Australian kids out there, young people, all age people, all want to celebrate Australia. We've got to make it big this year.
So I guess the question becomes, this poll found that only 10% of Australians have a problem with January 26. Only 10%?
10%.
So why on earth is this a constant problem every year when it's such a tiny minority of people that have got a problem?
Well, they've got a big mouth. They make a lot of noise. They bang on the drums. And governments are stupid to listen to them. Because, look what's happening. We need to bring our country together. I'll give you a good example. I was at a book launch, one of Tony Abbott's book launch, and a woman asked a question. She said, my preschool kids come home, 2 young kids, 4 or 5, and they said, "Where do we belong?" And she said, "What are you talking about?" I said, we had some teacher come into the school today and said, "You don't belong here." And I'm sitting here, I said, you know what? You tell your kids, an Aboriginal person said, you belong here. They belong here. Yeah. This is the nonsense that's going on. We are all Australians, no matter whether you've been here 5 minutes or you've been here for 5,000 years or whatever. We're all here and we're building a beautiful, great nation.
So why does the Australian Research Council give $1.5 million of our money, this was just the other day, to a research project to investigate changing the date? I mean, we've got this poll showing that most of us are very happy with January 26, and yet government institutions keep throwing our money at projects to change it.
This is it. This is the whinging crowd. The people who don't like Australia. And it's only a tiny little group of people, even that 10%, you'd probably find some of them want to have a celebration on another day. So this tiny little group of people who are pushing this agenda, and governments are funding them to do these things. We should be funding about how we should, how we should getting better education to our school systems, teaching kids that they do belong here. They should be proud of Australia, learning about what our diggers and everyone did in the past to make this a better country.
So I was puzzled, just to stay with this theme, the National Australia Day Council. So as the name suggests, it's the job of the National Australia Day Council to promote Australia Day.
Yes.
But they've given taxpayer money to a Blue Mountains Aboriginal group who are going to run on January 26 what they're calling a Survival Day. How does the Australia Day Council giving money to an Indigenous group to run not an Australia Day event, but a Survival Day event promote Australia Day?
This is the idiocy of the whole thing again. What that should have done, been sorted, was to say, look, here, we've been in Australia so many thousand years, and look at this great nation that we're building. We've got rid of all the race laws in this country. We've got voting rights. We've got everyone working together. We're helping people get into jobs, education, and land rights and all this type of stuff. And we're building this great country. We've got migrants coming here now. Let's celebrate, our Indigenous heritage, but also celebrate that we're part of this fantastic, incredible country, which is probably the best country in the world, as long as we deal with some of these issues that we've got at the moment.
Yeah. Australia Day. You've got Sydney Police preparing to facilitate another anti-Australia Day march next week. There's going to be one in Melbourne as well. Don't these Hate Australia protests seem off to you after Bondi?
Well, yeah, I do think they are particularly off after the attack on Bondi. But in general, Andrew, I think it's off completely. It's actually very offensive to, I would say, the majority of Australians who love this country, love our values, and are proud to be Australians. Now, if you are going to be taking part in these protests, I would ask yourself, why on earth do you want to be here? Because if you don't love this country, the door is open. You can leave anytime you want. Because in the end, we get to wake up, Andrew, on Australia Day on the 26th of January, not in the third world. We're not in a war zone. We're not fighting for our freedoms like they are right now in Iran. done because we have already got our freedoms. Yet here we go again. Of course, the self-loathing starts up again. And, well, we can't be surprised. I mean, the Prime Minister still stands in front of three flags. You've got companies across the country offering employees an opportunity to work on Australia Day if they wish. And once again, it's this progressive left that are just trying to infiltrate our values, infiltrate everything that we stand for and trying to completely wipe out what British settlers brought to this country. And it's about time we stand up for our values. And I think if Bondi taught us anything is that we should love our country and fight for our freedoms and fight for those values. Though I have to say, a report from the IPA yesterday suggested that 75% of Australians actually want to celebrate Australia Day on January 26th. So I do wonder if the tide's turning. But I do agree, it is completely off given the events of Bondi.
Actually, it is weird, isn't it? This alliance. I mean, it's no secret. I mean, you've seen it in Melbourne quite often. You've got Palestinian flags being flown with Aboriginal flags, not Australian flags. The merging of causes here.
And I wish they wouldn't fly the Aboriginal flag with the Palestinian flag like that in terms of rebellion rather than unity.
But Australia to be under assault from so many people that seem to hate its very existence, and I'm including, non-Muslim, born here, white Australians that have been indoctrinated into a contempt for this country. I think it is dangerous.
Well, as you say, Andrew, including a lot of generational Australians. And there is a stark difference when you go to citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day to those councils that still opt to have them on Australia Day, because don't forget, a lot of councils refuse to have citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day or Australia Day ceremonies. But people who come here as migrants, they are so excited to be Australian. They're so excited to celebrate their first Australia Day and get out the Australian flag and have a barbecue with their family in the backyard. It is really exciting for them, and they're so proud to join and be part of our culture. And it is so sad to see people from generational families in this country marching in the streets against Australia Day. And look, I think we have all learnt with time history and what some of that history means to people, but that doesn't mean that we can outright reject all the good history that has come along with that as well, while we develop an understanding. I'm not for any changing of the date, Andrew and Danica. I know there's a movement on it, and if I was the head of human resources or the head of people at a corporate, that would not be the top of my list for staff retention and attraction, I can tell you that.
Danica, meanwhile, you've got China reminding us again that it's a new...
Hey, I'm Emma Garlett, and on today's episode of Paint It Black, I'll be weighing in on the January 26 debate. I'll also try and help give you some tips on how you can have difficult conversations that might arise if you don't want to celebrate January 26. Now, before I get started, I'll be talking about some themes that might be upsetting or triggering to some, so please take care while watching. And I know this is a sensitive topic, so remember, if you're going to comment, please be kind. Now, join me as I paint it black.
I haven't rehearsed this, viewers, so let's just see where this leads.
Okay, so I want you to picture a quintessential Australia Day. A lot might imagine barbecues, citizenship ceremonies, beaches packed full of people, and fireworks on January 26. But for a lot of the people, that's not the case. They'll be reflecting on what the day means. It's marketed as a day to bring all Australians together, people from all over the world who call themselves Australian. But for the very first Australians, it's not a day of inclusion or celebration. Now, to those watching this who might feel the need to say something like, blah, 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 changing the date comes up every year, or it's just time we accept it, mostly on social media, I want you to think about why the conversation about the date keeps coming up every year. It must be pretty important to the people negatively impacted by January 26. I heard a really good analogy about the day a few years back. I was told to think of it as if someone broke into your home, destroyed some of your precious belongings, stole from you, and overall traumatised you. Then, every year on that date, they come back to your house and have a party about it.
There is a reality to that. There's no doubt about it. My grandmother on my father's side, she was of the stolen generation. They tried to take one of my cousins as well, but the lady cancelled out at the end. There is a side to this. Cook was told, do not interfere with civilised land, with inhabited lands, civilised lands. And remember, to the Aboriginals, it was civilised with where they were at. That's how they lived. So we'll go with this narrative, but I do want to say I don't think that we should stay in this place. I don't think we should stay in this place. I think we should forgive, heal from the trauma, and move on. But I want to listen to this narrative out of respect.
Mad, pretty upset about people partying over your trauma, right? You could see that this is how some people feel about January 26th, the day that marked the start of a lot of trauma for First Nations people. You might have seen on social media or people wearing clothes saying they're not the date to celebrate. It's a day that's been marketed as a day to bring all Australians together. But for many First Nations people, it's isolating, cruel and triggering. The grassroots campaigns and calls to raise public awareness of the problems with Australia Day have been getting louder over the years, and this year in particular, one organisation has taken the conversation one step further. This year, fashion brand and Aboriginal-owned not-for-profit Clothing the Gap has posed a new question. The question has come about through conversations and consultation with First Nations communities around Australia about how January 26 or Australia Day can be framed. They are change the date, abolish the date, or rename and reframe the date. Those who want to change the date, it's pretty self-explanatory. For many people, January 26 is painful for First Nations people and marks the beginning of genocide and invasion.
Genocide's the wrong word, because genocide is a determined annihilation, which didn't happen. But it was murderous, it was massacrous, and it was terrible. Now, change the date to another date. It doesn't matter if it's on December 26, July 26, June 26. It's all going to equal the same message. Changing the date is going to accomplish nothing.
Today advocates that Australia Day should be for all Australians, and if we change the date, we can create an inclusive national holiday for people in this country. Abolish the date. Clothing the Gap said those who support Abolish Australia Day advocate that the day should be removed altogether. To supporters, simply changing the date only seeks to entrench Australian nationalism. Changing the date without action and treaty only moves the celebration of unfinished business to another date. And finally, out of a lack of action from the government and ignorance from some of the public, the thought to rename and reframe the date has formed. Supporters believe renaming Australia Day by referring to it as Invasion Day, Survival Day, or a day of mourning centres First Nations people in the conversation.
Well, you know what? If that's what the Aboriginals, and I'm one of them, want to do, that's up to them. Okay? Whether the government's going to accept that or not is up to them. But at this point, and the life in which I've had to work my skin to the bones to get, I wouldn't have had without the British coming here. Now, is that to say the life that I would have had would have been worse? I don't know. I think you culturalise into what you've been raised in, but I really can't complain about the life that I've been given under this culture. I can't. I have animosity and hurt and trauma for what happened to my grandmother and the ancestors before her. No problem there. What happened to my cousin and how they were going to take one of my cousins and all that sort of thing. I can't make excuses for that or repair it. But what I can do is accept the apologies that have been given. There's been billions of dollars given. I don't know who got it. Somebody's profited out of it. There are fair and square advantages given to the Koori Aboriginal people. But for those that aren't happy and they want this to be called Invasion Day or Survival Day or Day of Mourning or all of it, I can't see a problem with that either. If that's completely up to them, if that's what they want to do.
In the conversation, and acknowledges the ongoing pain and trauma of colonisation. Already, we are seeing a public shift with sporting codes, businesses and local councils no longer recognising Jan 26 as Australia Day.
Now, the thing about it is, and we have to be real, there are going to be a group of people that are never going to forgive, ever, what happened, right? And that's fair. That's fair. But you have to be progressive. You have to be, no matter what's like. Okay, take Palestine for instance. They were given the land in 2005, but they weren't progressive. They were destructive. They went backwards. Now, in all honesty, if the Aboriginals were given back the land and the colonists come under their rule, do you think it'd be sustainable Just ask that question. I'm not trying to undermine how this woman feels or what, the other mobs feel and all the rest of it, but we've got to be progressive. There's no point going backwards. And
day to celebrate, with the hashtag not a date to celebrate trending throughout the year. So where do you sit on this debate? If you want more information on the debate, I urge you to check out Clothing the Gap on Instagram or on their website. They have some really in-depth and well-researched information. I'll post a link to them in the description. Now, I understand if you make it public that you don't want to celebrate January 26, some difficult conversations might arise. Whether you're a First Nations person or an ally, these conversations might be hurtful, confrontational, or even angry. Reach Out, an online mental health service, has put together some tips on how to have conversations around Australia Day and some strategies if it all becomes too overwhelming. Some of their strategies include to attend or volunteer at an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander festival, start a conversation with a trusted friend on the topic. If you're struggling with your mental health, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or contact 13 Yarn, that's 13 92 76. Take time to connect with friends and family, connect to culture, switch off from social media, or even simply change the topic. For more information, head to the Reach Out website. I'll post a link in the description. While you think about what January 26 means for you, let's have a look at how we got here.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, on January 26, 1788, the first fleet landed in Australia led by Captain Arthur Phillip. That marked the beginning of European settlement on the soil that was home to Indigenous people for more than 60,000 years.
Now, they were ordered, they were told before they left, and I'll grant this, they were ordered, do not interfere with inhabited lands. But they did. And that part is unforgivable.
Day was also known as Foundation Day and First Landing Day until 1935, when all Australian states and territories used the name Australia Day to mark January 26. But Australia Day was not consistently celebrated as a public holiday across Australia on the specific day of January 26 until 1994. And this has been an argument against the sticking point amongst most people who want to keep the date. Now, the date is also referred by many First Nations people as Invasion Day, Survival Day, or a day of mourning. As for many, it symbolises a loss of sovereignty and the loss of culture. As much as January 26 is celebrated by the community, it's also a day of dread and sadness. And I think it's important we as a country, from everyday people to our top politicians, recognise that. On December 16 last year, the federal government announced changes to the Australian Citizenship Ceremonies Code to give Australian councils an option to host their ceremonies 3 days either side of Australia Day instead of on the day itself. The City of Vincent and the town of Cambridge have changed the date of their Australian Day citizenship ceremonies. Vincent's ceremony, which is usually held on January 26, has been moved to the following day, while Cambridge has moved its Citizenship Day to January 25th. Despite refusing to hold celebrations on January 26 for the past 6 years, the City of Fremantle will still hold a citizenship ceremony on the public holiday. However, there won't be any kinds of celebrations in Fremantle. Fremantle's annual one-day event will go ahead on January 28th at the Woyullup Court, featuring Thomas Mayo, a leading advocate for First Nations voice to Parliament. He has travelled the country since 2017, campaigning for the Statement from the Heart. And all over the country, instead of celebrations on January 26, there will be protests and rallies. In WA, the protests will be held in the Supreme Court Gardens with the Brat concert. The Perth Invasion Day rally will be held at Forest Chase. There will be a music video filmed at Langley Park. And in Broome, the annual Ribby Survival Day event will be held at the Gimme Club. And finally, some businesses are giving employees the option to work on the public holiday. Late last year, the Albanese government announced it will allow public service workers to substitute the Australia Day public holiday for another day if employees choose to work on January 26. But the coalition accused the government of an attempt to deliberately undermine Australia Day, calling on the Prime Minister to reverse the decision. As well as that, a number of private companies are also allowing workers to work on Australia Day in exchange for another day off. Some of the companies include Woolworths, Kmart, Telstra, Deloitte, and CSL. The National Tertiary Education Union is one of few unions advocating for staff to be given the option to work, with the deputy head of the ACTU, Scott Connolly, arguing that the movement was looking forward to the national conversation on The Voice later this year. So as you can see, a few changes are slowly being made. But for Australia Day to mean something positive for all Australians, we need to acknowledge the pain caused to First Nations people, hear their voices, and do something meaningful to include them in the conversation and take action to start healing. One day, I hope for an Australia Day where we can all be proud to celebrate this beautiful country we call home.
If we don't change the date of Australia Day, will we ever end the arguments around Australia Day?
It's an annual thing. I'm on public record. I've written about this. I've spoken about this in speeches, and that I'm a change the date guy, right? So I'd like to see the date changed. I'm sick and tired of this argument because I believe Australia is a good country. We're probably one of the most successful multicultural countries in the world if you look at all the rest. And we've got some great people here and we can do some more great things. Are we perfect? No, we're not. My idea was to say, okay, Independence Day in the United States is on the day that they got independence. So when the Commonwealth of Australia started? Well, that was the 1st of January 1901. Now, being a good Aussie bloke, I don't want to give up a public holiday. but and now I'm starting to get. I've seen that joke about May the 8th and stuff. I'm actually starting to like it. I'm starting to like that we should do that because one thing, it's funny. The other thing too, it starts to bring us together because we can't really resolve things if we just keep on arguing and chucking things at each other. We've got to come and sit down and have a conversation. And people talk about truth talking and stuff like that. We've got to have those conversations. And if we don't do that, then things don't change. Like I said, I played soccer and we had heaps of migrants coming out. And a lot of blokes I went to school, they go into a Catholic school, their parents couldn't even speak English and stuff. But we got to know each other. And the only way we got to know each other was sitting around and talking to each other and telling true stories. They told me their stories about why they had to leave Italy or Greece and places like that. I met this kid, I said, what are you? And he said, he's Estonian. And I said, oh, mate, I may be a dumb black fella from the bush, but there's no such place as Estonia. And he was a smart kid. He took me into the library, and probably the first time I went into a library, and he showed me a map. And then all of a sudden the conversation started. And that's what we need to do. We need to have this conversation, and through that conversation we can get better.
Finish it, maybe.
Alexander Downer, do you have a view about changing the date of Australia Day?
Well, it's difficult to reconcile the two opinions here. A lot of Australians are happy with Australia Day as it is, and if it would change, they would be offended and it would make them unhappy. Some Australians...
I wouldn't be offended.
Call it Invasion Day and see it as a day of shame and the beginning of the destruction of Indigenous and traditional Australia. So how do you reconcile those 2 points of view, which is the intellectual challenge? You don't want to cause offence to either group. So I'm quite attracted to the idea of people put by other people, which is that you would have 2 days instead of just 1 day. 1 day would be commemorating the arrival of the First Fleet, which is obviously significant because it was the beginning of the total change of Australia into the Australia we know today, but a day of substantial respect for Indigenous Australia and 60 or so thousand years of Indigenous culture. We do have NAIDOC Week, but to be honest, I don't think people focus very much on NAIDOC Week and not many people know about it. So I think finding a day where there is a commemoration of what happened to Indigenous people and indeed a celebration of Indigenous culture is a very constructive idea, without at the same time turning your backs on what settler Australians have achieved as well, because we want to praise that, and they have done wonderful things. They've made mistakes, and everyone's made mistakes. I'm sure Indigenous Australians have as well.
Tanya Hosh, I can see you reacting to Alexander Downer here.
No.
There is also the argument, though, isn't there, Tanya Hosh, that keeping Australia Day as it is forces Australia to have some of the difficult conversations you're saying are so important to have.
Yeah, but I guess the problem is that we don't really have a process for having those conversations, which is why it's a perennial debate. And I think that, some of the conversation that I observed this year was great because it was going beyond the idea of just changing the day. It was really talking about those other things that are important to the national story. I thought the Australia Day campaign this year that was really trying to identify that and integrate those things. I certainly think that if we're going to have a day to, celebrate and embrace and appreciate more about the first Australians, then I want a public holiday for it. And we don't get one of those in NAIDOC Week. But I think, the national story, the things that we still have not resolved, the unfinished business, the conversations that I keep referring to as unfinished, I feel like they're as much a part of us resolving these matters, because and I do feel like that the mood of the country is changing and is much more open to this conversation than it once was, and I see that as natural. But the date will get changed, and then a whole lot of people will feel really good about that. But then there'll still be issues for First Australians that have not been addressed, and we'll want to keep talking about that. And then you go back to that, they're never happy. You can't do enough for them. There's a lot of things that we still need to tackle that do relate to our history, the colonisation, the racism, all of the injustices that really do require us to do a deeper dive into what we're saying about our country, how we tell that story, how we respect those perspectives. The reality is the first Australians were here first. And so, and I just want to acknowledge all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people everywhere for what they have done and do to make Australia great. And I really wish there was an opportunity to properly acknowledge that beyond the Welcome to Country ceremonies that are now much more greatly embraced. There's just been so many different contributions from First Australians that a lot of Australians don't even know about. And we've got a real opportunity here through the framing of changing the date to do so much more to get us understanding as a whole nation why the First Australians matter. The oldest living continuing cultures on the planet, an incredible resilience, incredible strength, but there is a lot of trauma there, there's a lot of pain there, and as Grace was saying earlier, and I think, Shane, you've been saying too, it's got to be okay to talk about all of those things. It's part of the healing process to talk about those things. And we've had some great change. We had the apology to the stolen generations, and guess what? The sky didn't fall in. And there were people who were not supportive about that. But it seems that they've moved on. And I think that we can move on from this.
Grace, you're from a generation that seems to have a lot of momentum on this question of changing the date. Why do you think for younger Australians it is so appealing to change the date?
I think it's just again, it comes back to the point that I made before about common sense. And Tanya has talked a lot about, how important it is to acknowledge these things. And I mean, honestly though, my opinion on this shouldn't really matter. I think this debate should be dominated by Indigenous Australians. And I mean, Warren also talked about symbols though, and it's an important symbol. It costs us nothing to change the date. It costs us nothing. We can still celebrate Australia. We can celebrate Australia every day. I know I do. So many great things about Australia. But to change the date would mean so much to our First Nations people. And I think that's the least that we could do to change the date.
To talk about this one, but do we need to have a holiday on Australia Day? What's your take on that?
Leave it the way it is. And you know what, the young ones, I'm surprised by this. I think it's wonderful when you got, 72% of the young ones saying no, the corporation should not be changed today or giving them another day off in lieu of it, and 53% say no, it stays as Australia Day. That's fantastic to hear. Music to my ears. People, Australia Day is Australia Day. Be proud of who you are and accept that day. Where this debate goes on every year, I don't know why. I wish people would just accept it, get over it, move on and enjoy and celebrate as all Australians should.
Back in the 1970s, one of my favourite Aussie rock groups were the Skyhooks, a group, sadly, you no longer hear much about. One of their big hits and big albums and single was called Ego Is Not a Dirty Word. Don't you believe what you've seen or you've heard, because ego is not a dirty word. The 60s, 70s and 80s were, to my mind, the high point of post-war Australian achievement. We were the envy of the world. Our sporting prowess was second to none. Our entrepreneurs and business people, like my boss here at Sky, Rupert Murdoch, were taking the world by storm. Even in cinema, music and the arts, we were unbeatable. We quite literally were conquering the world. And the best of our conquerors became household names across the globe. And we Aussies were very much the envy of the world. So back then, a song like Ego Is Not a Dirty Word did kind of make sense. Aussies were loud, proud, successful, and yes, egotistical. Rightly so, as Australian entrepreneurial expats and talent conquered America, Great Britain, Southeast Asia, Europe, and many, many other places. My friend and former boss Ian Beattie, for example, was the classic Aussie expat entrepreneur responsible for the rise and dominance of Singapore Airlines, and indeed he was the grandfather of the entire Singapore tourism industry. One of the ads that Gary Horner and I wrote for Ian Beattie basically invented the Singapore stopover.
We've introduced the Singapore stopover. You get to break your trip and relax in a first-class hotel.
I suppose you got the day right.
Of course I did. I'm not stupid. You get to do a bit of shopping, maybe take in a few of the sights, get into the swing of things.
In the world of comedy and the arts, Australians and business, sports, Australians were unstoppable. Dame Edna, Foster's Lager, Crocodile Dundee, Men at Work, Kylie Minogue, Clive James, In Excess, Greg Norman, Olivia Newton-John, Russell Crowe, Nicole Kidman, all part of the great Aussie diaspora who conquered dare I say, colonised the cultural West. We hear a great deal of vitriol spouted about colonisation and the so-called evils of colonialism and colonial powers these days. Particularly recently, this weekend, Australia's proud and precious colonial history is increasingly and relentlessly denigrated and defamed in our education system, in the media. But what is colonialism? What defines colonial? If you look up the word colonial in a dictionary, you get a mishmash of circular definitions such as concerning or pertaining to a colony or colonies, or that colonisers are a critical component of colonisation. Yeah, whatever. But if the term actually derives from the Latin word for a farmer and simply means a new area which is being cultivated, an outpost, if you like. Of course, to the modern rabid left, colonial means, quote, the intention of partially or completely supplanting the existing Indigenous peoples, possibly amounting to genocide. Have a listen to this idiocy being pronounced in the Australian Parliament this week by none other, of course, than the vile Greens.
Jewish Australians won't be safe from the scourge of anti-Semitism until Muslim Australians are safe from the scourge of Islamophobia. And neither will be safe until all Australians are safe from racism and from religious intolerance. And until we reckon with the brutality and the underlying violence of the colonisation.
According to the left, colonialism is the great evil responsible for all the evils of the modern world. Not radical Islam, not hatred built on religious oppression, not the evils of socialism and communist oppression, but colonialism. Such statements are asinine and, quite frankly, insidious. Similarly, we heard from the ridiculous character at the heart of the kerfuffle around the Adelaide Writers' Festival that Israel is, quote, an apartheid, colonial state. Again, blithering nonsense, unworthy of comment. But what is really going on here is a sinister sleight of hand, whereby the left manipulate the concept of the evils of colonialism as a catch-all under which they merge radical anti-Zionism with radical Indigenous activism, with hatred of America, hatred of Judeo-Christianity, and with hatred of the individual. Which is why we so frequently see hard left radicals marching under the twin banners of the
I wish they wouldn't mix the Aboriginal flag with the Palestinian flag. It's you know why? Because the Aboriginals didn't provoke the colonists. The colonists were told not to interfere with inhabited lands. Now, and they did, and that's wrong, right? And it should never have been allowed, but they did it, and they've gotten away with it, and we can't change the past. But the Palestinians, they sought for war. They sought for war, and that's what they got, and they don't like it.
Original flag and the Palestinian flag. All they are parading is their hatred of democracy, their hatred of Australia, and their hatred of Western values. On a side note, to call Israel colonial has to be one of the dopiest comments even the idiots of the left can confabulate. Israel is a tiny pinprick in a vast Islamic collection of nations. If anyone is the colonizer, i.e. spreading their culture to new outposts, it's the forces of Islam. The great irony is, of course, that our youth, our education system, most of our media, most of our public institutions have indeed been conquered, not by the benign colonialism of Australian democratic thought and values, but by the dangerous forces and belief systems of the radical socialist left. This weekend is Australia Day, and we should all celebrate it proudly and loudly. Australia Day, January 26th, because it was colonisation that brought laws, civilisation, technology, medicine, prosperity, opportunity and longevity to the Indigenous peoples of this land. It was colonisation that turned an outdoor prison of the worst rabble of offenders from the British penal system and transformed them into an astonishing land of free settlers, explorers, farmers, graziers, builders, miners, engineers, and entrepreneurs and artists who built one of the most prosperous and successful nations on earth. It was colonisation that turned this barren, inhospitable, dangerous and untamed continent into a welcoming paradise for millions of refugees and their children from the darkest places across the planet, and became a haven of peace and security from the worst horrors mankind can inflict. Australia grew out of being farmed as an outpost that was colonised by the best of British intentions and values. From that original colonial seed grew a great nation of equality, fairness, wealth, health, prosperity, and opportunity for all. As we grew into one of the greatest nations on earth, we even proudly took our talents and colonised them in turn across the globe. To paraphrase the Skyhooks, don't believe what you've seen or you've heard. Colonialism is not a dirty word.
Here's an interesting idea for Australia Day. Listen to this.
To do on Australia Day is something that I've always felt is a great idea, and it would solve all the problems, where we mourn in the morning and we pay our respects until midday, and then after that is a time to celebrate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And to go one better on that, I think, maybe you have the day of mourning on the 26th and reflection of the atrocities that did happen. But then the next day, the 27th, we celebrate the new beginning of the new Australia.
Oh, you're a genius. That's 2 public holidays.
That's what I'm saying.
I think that's a great idea, really. In a way, it's fair. It's been fair to the First Nations, and it's accepting the colonisation. I think that's a great idea.
That's what I'm saying.
Not going to happen.
Why not, Pauline? Why are you poo-pooing that?
We've got enough. Keep acknowledging. What about the convicts that came here? They were dragged away from their own country. They were brought here. Do we acknowledge the people that come from the convict background? Do they say, the way that our parents were treated?
They were misfits, man. They were misfits. They didn't want them over there in England. You know what I mean? They wanted to bring them out here.
That's history. That is history, Anthony. And until we move on and say, oh, that's past, it's like me. I was in prison wrongly. I can't keep going back and feel sorry for myself and play the victim. I have to say, that's happened to me, move on, and I pick up the pieces.
But you
and
can't move on with this. Like, this is going to happen every year it's going to happen. You know what I mean? It's going to create more division. We want to bring people together.
But do you think that if we were brought together in the morning to pay respects, will it end there? Is Pauline right that just won't even solve that issue anyway?
You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You give the blackfellas what they deservedly would like, and then you get all the Australians what they want in the afternoon, where we celebrate the new new Australia.
I feel like it's just, I get what you're saying.
I think that's a great idea. I really think that's a great idea. That's fair. Celebrate the Aboriginals and what happened to them in the morning, and then let the Australians have that's a great idea.
Pauline, there is never going to be a solution where everyone is happy. But I think as Australians, we want to be able to celebrate this country because it is such a wonderful country. We know how lucky we are to live here. But we do, there are a lot of people like myself and Brooklyn, I don't know about you, Pete, but we do feel like, we don't want to do that because I don't want to disrespect what, the Aboriginal people have been through and that history. And I just think it would be a really nice kind of compromise to go, hey, I actually want to pay my respects to that. I'd be happy to do that in the morning. And then I feel like we would all feel like Australia Day is recognising both how wonderful it is,
but great idea.
The
That's a
terrible things that happen.
fantastic idea.
Pauline, why are you staring at me like that, Pauline? You are giving me the death stare right now.
Am I?
Yeah, you are.
Pauline, do you think that Australia's history before 1788, when Europeans arrived, is that worth celebrating?
How can I answer that when I have no idea of history? There's no written history. You have the Aboriginal stories or dream time or whatever how they depict it. I have no indication. The only way that I know about the history of England is because I've read the books and what's there to tell me what's happened, and I take an interest.
There is Aboriginal history. There's no denying that. And again, I'm going to repeat, they were told not to interfere with inhabited lands, and they did. And that's the worst part about it.
That what's happened in the country prior to but there's no writings, there was nothing.
But even science tells us with rock paintings and we know people were here living and they have their stories.
Over 50,000.
That has been acknowledged. Okay, that has been acknowledged, yes, by all means. And we do have the paintings, and that has been acknowledged. We've acknowledged how many times the Prime Ministers and everyone said sorry for what's happened in the past, how much remuneration has been paid.
We acknowledge our Anzacs, that's in the past, but we still do that every year. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging and paying respect.
But we have.
But to say we have is like, we've done that now, so we should never acknowledge it again. Yes, exactly. That would be the same. Like, why would we do that every year for our soldiers, but we're not prepared to do it for?
Because our soldiers are still fighting around the world.
And so blackfellas, we're still fighting.
Yeah,
look at all the statistics on the blackfellas, by imprisonment, and all that. Like, we're down the bottom. We're on the bottom, and in order to close the gap, we need to make them inclusive.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do you reckon, Pauline, a lot of Australians would have an issue with that, though? Do you think that is, I mean, you speak to the people, you know what your supporters want. Doing something like that, you don't think would fly with them? They wouldn't want that?
I don't think that's an issue. I think that's the wisest thing I've heard. Have the memorial for the Aboriginals respectfully in the morning till lunchtime or 11 o'clock or whatever, and then switch to the colonisers. I think that's meeting everyone halfway. I think that's a great idea. Do you? I think that's fantastic. But anyway.
And sick and tired of the fact is that we've, as Lydia Thorpe said to me in Parliament, go back where you came from. That's the attitude of a lot of these people. And this is my country. I was born here. Yeah. I'm sick of being made to feel this is not my country, all right, and that it's only Aboriginal. Aboriginal land always was, always will be. That's the attitude. And until we actually treat everyone equal and the same, regardless of race or cultural background, that we do have, even those migrants have come here to make this country, their country, I acknowledge them as much. That they have a right to be here. They've moved here to become Australians, and I respect that.
I'm
not given that respect by Aboriginal people because even though I was born here, where's the respect to us?
Because I think that at the moment the division is being created by, on one side they're being so obstinate about it and going, why should we, If we were able to integrate that and go, yes, What
do you think I've been trying to do for years, Jackie? By treating people equally the same. But every time you have the agitators, like the Lydia Thorpe in Parliament, this is war, Sick and tired of hearing this. Yeah. How many times do we get welcome to country on planes or flights everywhere? People sick and tired of it. It was only something that was introduced in the 70s. Flags now, 3 flags that we're flying. I thought this country has 1 flag. These are the divisions that people see. Aboriginal people can have health benefits and everything given to them, even the kids going to schools and everything that's benefit. I've got people out there living in cars and families. They're not a black fella, but they don't get the assistance and help that you're Aboriginal. We've done everything to try and assist. Until it's done on an individual needs basis, forget about the culture, that's when we'll start mending together.
Yeah, look, I get where you're going with that aspect. Blaine has called through. Blaine,
I don't think so. I don't think many of the Aboriginal people are ever going to forgive the colonisation of Australia. I just don't think they're going to.
You want to ask, is it for Pauline or Anthony?
Yeah, it's for Pauline. I just want to know why you can't move a date when every year Easter is on a different date and the King's birthday, previously the Queen's birthday, is on a different date every single year. So saying you can't have it on another date is just, in my opinion, a cop-out.
Well, I don't think it's a cop-out. It's 26, the same as we have Anzac Day on the 25th. We have Christmas Day on the 25th of December every year. So those are set dates that we have. Christmas, Easter is done because of it making it a long weekend, a Good Friday. Yeah. So that changes with it. I don't believe in bloody King's birthday or the Queen's birthday either. We shouldn't be having that as a public holiday.
Are you going to get rid of those?
So get rid of that one and give us January 27, like Anthony suggested.
Won't be happening.
Why not?
Because I don't believe the 2 days.
You said you didn't like.
You serve the people, so let the people decide.
You're saying 2 days holiday, for it, and I think that if we want this country to move forward, it's all right to say just go and have public holidays. Go and ask the businesses out there who've got to pay the wages. Ask the people out there, consumers, do they want an extra increase? If we want this country to move forward, it's very easy for people to say, I'll give a public holiday, I'll give more time off, all the rest of it, and that's why this country's going backwards.
Can I, you're not going to be a fan of my policy that I wanted to put to you if you become Prime Minister. I think that with kids in school, we should ditch a year of curriculum and do a year of therapy and give them the tools to understand how their bodies work and their brains, and when it comes to boundaries, healthy relationships, mental health, like addiction, everything that sets them up.
Well, she's just come out of a rehabilitation from alcohol and stuff. So no wonder she's onto that.
To have a life where they make better choices and more informed choices. What do you think?
Why don't we do that? When I went to school, we did it was called physical education.
Nah, that's shit. Physical education was like running around the field. I'm talking about therapy.
My day when I went to school, and you were taught this. Why don't we teach kids about critical thinking, resilience, and being able to?
I bet they weren't.
Why don't we teach them that these days, Jackie? A lot of things what you're saying should be taught in the house. So what's happened to parents out there? Why don't they do the parenting?
Parents aren't psychologists. They're not teaching them that. They don't know the correct information. They actually don't. So they can't teach their kids that.
Well,
so why is it
they can teach them the basic fundamentals of wisdom and foolishness. One of the things that's challenging me at the moment is how foolish some of the decisions these young people make when they know better.
sudden, a couple of generations later, but we didn't have that with my generation. So what's happened in between? Is it all the devices, all the gadgets, everything?
Yeah, there's so much out there that's actually, I think, for kids' mental health, there is so much.
Well, throw the gadgets away. Don't give them their iPhones.
But it's beyond that.
Give them
It's more than that. It's understanding. If you just take it away, that's just punishment without understanding how their brains are working and why they're addicted to it. What is it that they're addicted to? To understand it helps them.
Through the educational system, it should be done there. You know, you're going to take a lot of kids. Do you know that our kids these days are 2 years behind or 3 years behind our counterparts in science and maths? Our counterparts being Singapore and China. So our kids can't even keep up. Our kids are so far behind the educational system, even doing maths. Kids can't even add up sums in their head. They've actually have calculators. They don't know how to spell unless they've got a computer. We have gone so far backwards in our educational system.
Why?
And well, it's the way it's been taught.
Right.
Because of the way the curriculum's taught. We've got teachers going through the educational system that aren't qualified. Try to implement their, what is good for them to help them assist. And you talk about,
Actually,
and we spoke about a lot
that.
of the, yes, I have. And we talk about the monies where it's going. It's not going to the people supposed to be getting the money because there's so much corruption in between.
Yeah.
So a lot of the black fellas and white fellas are ripping off the money from where it's supposed to go.
I'm with you there, 100%.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yeah, see, the black fellas as well. The black politicians as well are ripping off the money along with the whites. Good point. And Mundine knows it.
Well, I agree on a lot of things. If you know exactly where I stand.
Yeah, see, that might be the issue, right? Like, a lot of people don't know exactly what it is that you plan on changing there, and that
the
it can
corruption,
be...
Jackie, get rid of the corruption that's happening.
Yeah, there
and
is, you're
these
right.
people out there are abusing the system, and it's not going. I tried to get housing for the community up at Bamako, North Queensland, to work with them so they could actually make and build their own houses. You know, the government wasn't even interested in that. Another plan, I wanted $500,000 to help with these communities up there. I've done a lot of work for the Aboriginal people to try and get things for them.
And me and Pauline were saying there's a lot of Johnny-come-latelys. Like, they're coming out like from the woodworks. They look like Casper the Ghost, but they're black fellas. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah,
100%.
There is
so many.
We'll leave that
we
there.
need to have. Don't bury it and say you can't discuss it. It's only we'll find the answers to it if we're truthful with each other and expose what's going on out there and stop burying it.
Australia Day viewers, let's see what happens, and I'll see you on the next one.